It was obvious from her ass. I would recognize Casey's ass anywhere. Even without the dragonfly tattoo on my upper left butt cheek, I would have known it was her. The woman in the video straightened up, and I could see the rose on her right shoulder blade. There was no doubt. It wouldn't be so bad if it was a hidden beach video or something, but this was a secret society of sex video, and Casey was enthusiastically pleasuring some guy, completely naked, with her bare butt turned straight towards the camera. The only thing she was wearing was her damn wedding ring. Ironic. The rational part of my brain noted the facts. The video was filmed approximately 15 years ago. Casey hasn't worn her hair like this in a long time. This coincided well with the time when I signed a contract with an oil company and worked in remote stations for 18 months. Good money, even great money that saved us financially after the company I worked for went bankrupt and I was left without a job. With 2 small children and a house on the verge of losing, we were in serious trouble. Casey's salary as a nurse was completely inadequate, and we began to desperately look for a way out. I looked for a job for months, working behind the counter at a damn video store just to keep myself busy until this opportunity came along. An almost forgotten paper I wrote in college about safety systems on oil rigs became the magic key. It was a harrowing 18 months in places I never wanted to be, but it provided us with lifelong stability and led me to a permanent job, although it required us to move across the country almost immediately after my return. I was worried about us while I was working at these remote stations. Anyone in my place would worry about this, but Casey was so desperately attached to me when I returned that I locked all my fears inside and tried to ignore them. However, it seems that while it was torture for me, it was completely different for Casey. The camera moved. There were probably at least 14 people in the video, and it looked like it was filmed in some kind of large empty office where instead of cubicles there were mattresses and sofas arranged in a huge circle. Most of them had sex like rabbits. It was clearly a party where men and women switched partners quite quickly. While the camera was focusing on a vaguely familiar blonde sitting on some guy's face, in the background I saw a guy get on his knees behind Casey and start having sex with her. She didn't even slow down, continuing to provide pleasure. Although Casey was otherwise quite liberated, she did not like to please me in the early years of our marriage, and always said that it made her sick. Imagine my surprise when she eagerly pleasured this guy, then turned around and started pleasing the man who had just had sex with her. After my contract, she became much more interested in sex. Now at least I knew where this interest came from. I paused the video, stunned. The link to the site appeared in an old email we used to pay bills and other irrelevant work stuff. This account was originally just hers, but over the past few years we both started using it. The email was sent to our inbox by the school district's automated information system. Casey worked for the school system as a substitute nurse, so I had no reason to doubt that this was, as it said, an educational video. Instructive, no doubt. A distant part of me noted that someone with more technical experience or access to the school system had clearly decided to seriously annoy Casey. I played the video to the end, and then noticed that there were at least 40 other secret society of sex videos on the site. Emotionally, I was completely devastated. White noise was ringing in my ears, and I wanted to scream, cry, and break something at the same time. This lying cheater. I caught my breath, and mechanical calm finally took over. When you design security systems for hazardous environments, you quickly learn to react rather than act on emotions. I looked at my watch. There was about an hour left before her sports class ended, if, of course, she really was in class. I started downloading videos to the flash drive. After they were all copied, I closed the link, deleted it from my history, and deleted the copies from my home computer twice. I reminded myself to stay calm. I needed to analyze everything and make sure it was really her. Someone who was able to hack the school system might be able to fake the video, but with so many videos on the site, the potential for error was high. It took a lot of self-control for me not to snap when Casey got home. All this did not fit in my head. She never lost the affection that developed after our separation and spent every free second with me. When she had days off, she would bring me lunch to work. Moreover, it seemed that she was even a little obsessed with making sure that I always knew where she was and could find her. I told her I was working on a project to justify my time while I figured out the video. This gave me some time. They were absolutely real. I did extensive computer analysis and went through them frame by frame. There was no video mask, it was a real video. She wasn't in all the videos, but she was in more than half. No less than 24 separate videos at different times in different places. By that night, I had enabled parental controls on her phone, setting it to record calls and messages. The app I downloaded sent all her phone calls as audio files to my laptop. I recognized many people in the video. Many. Brady, who used to live next door to his wife Michelle, Andy, a police officer who lived 2 doors down, and his, as it turns out, not-so-humble wife Cindy. Chris, the guy from down the block who I've always disliked for his overly suave and ladies' man ways, was there too. There was Janet Rodriguez, like Casey, without a husband. Ben, a paramedic from our area, and Tiffany, Casey's friend who worked at a veterinary clinic. There were others, not always the same. Casey was obviously a very active participant. Casey took part in a variety of scenes with many partners. In one particularly memorable video, she, along with other girls, including Cindy and Cherry, found herself the center of attention of a large group of people. Interestingly, she was more attracted to scenes with women, although she had not shown interest in this before. In most of the videos, her interactions with other women took center stage. For example, she often led scenes with Cindy or Janet, demonstrating confidence and a dominant style. Over time, it became clear that this was her special hobby. She had a particularly close relationship with Cherry, with whom she often preferred to work separately from the group, demonstrating great mutual trust. Based on the timestamp of the video, I was able to determine the filming periods. As expected, they all dated back to the time of my contract, starting around the 4th month of my absence. None of the videos were taken during periods when I was at home, but one of the events was dated a week after my 15-day vacation. As I watched the videos chronologically, I noticed that in the earliest recordings, Casey seemed a little unsure, like she didn't want to be there. However, later she became more and more involved in what was happening, especially after she began to work in tandem with Cherry. Her interest in women began around the 4th party, when she arrived with a devious smile. In the last video of her, taken about a month and a half before my contract ended, she again looked thoughtful and walked away without doing anything other than taking off her clothes. It was probably guilt, although it was a little late for a sudden awakening of conscience. Most likely, she was simply afraid of being caught. A month and a half would give her exhausted body time to recover and possibly undergo STD testing. In total, I identified 16 men and women in the video. Neighbors, colleagues, parents of our children's friends, and a couple of elementary school teachers. I found out that the camera operator was always Michelle, Brady's wife. It seems that her special hobby was observing, although she sometimes participated in the process, remaining behind the scenes. One day, Casey decided to take the initiative while Michelle was busy filming, watching her husband and Janet. Casey clearly liked to be active and tried to show attention to each of the women in the group, and sometimes also involved Ben, who didn't seem to mind. On several occasions, Casey and Cherry actively interacted with Ben together. For some reason this, like her relationships with women, did not evoke any special emotions in me, although logically I understood that all this could be considered a betrayal. The human psyche is an amazing and complex thing. I would probably continue to analyze and perhaps put off the inevitable confrontation. I had never even suspected anything like this and had great difficulty reconciling it with the image of the Casey I knew. The most important thing I needed to know was why this letter appeared in the first place. This clearly wasn't an accident, and it doesn't seem like a weird joke. Whoever posted this clearly had an agenda, and I doubted I would like it. Another letter appeared just 2 days later, again to the same email account. It contained the same link and another message that would have been technically difficult to hack, from the gym where she went. This time I opened it first. I saw a message and a familiar link in the viewing window. Whoever was doing this was clearly pushing for a certain result. I closed the viewing window and set up the phone's camera on the charger to record video and stream it to my laptop over my home Wi-Fi. Casey, did you pay for your gym membership this month? She came up. I think yes. And what? Yes, it's probably some kind of advertising. Your message here is marked as urgent. Is it true? It's strange, they rarely send anything. Yes, that's what I thought. I kissed her on the forehead. I have work on a project. It will take about an hour, no more. She nodded. Is spaghetti okay? They'll do. I went upstairs. As soon as I got there, I turned on the broadcast from my phone camera. Casey walked over to the computer without haste. She clicked on the link with complete calm, but at the first frames of the video, she gasped in shock. She looked around in a panic, checked the corridor, then hurriedly watched the rest of the videos. The phone video wasn't the best quality, but the transition from normal complexion to deathly pallor and then to a sickly greenish tint was quite noticeable. She copied the link onto a piece of paper and then deleted the email. I saw her look up, and then, trembling, she took out an old notebook and began sending messages from her phone. I immediately opened the text message log. Casey, it's Casey. You said there is no more video from the party. What the hell? There are none. I burned the films a long time ago. Casey, they are everywhere on the internet. After a long pause, during which Casey sent the link, the answer came. Damn, who had them? Casey, I don't know. If Carl sees them, he will divorce me. If it doesn't kill you. I thought you had an open marriage. Casey, not really. So you had an open marriage, but you didn't tell Carl that it was open. Like Ben and his wife. Damn, this was a mess. Casey, I'm not going to explain it now. It was a long time ago. Maybe you can tell him that this was before the wedding. Casey, we got married right out of school because I'm going to explain you or Tiff or Brady. He knew many others. In the video, I saw Casey trying so hard not to cry as she typed. Casey, this will destroy my life. They sent me the link by email. She was right about that. I was not in the mood to forgive, but I wanted to know who was doing it. Call it curiosity or the desire to postpone the inevitable. As bad as it was, there was a chance that whoever it was planning to make things worse. Just because they were targeting Casey didn't mean they were my friends. It was almost certainly blackmail. This meant that they could target our money. The enemy of my enemy is just the enemy of my enemy, nothing more, although no matter how angry I was, it was difficult to call Casey an enemy. A traitor, a bitch, a cheater, and of course, a future abandonment, yes, but an enemy is another matter. The conversation continued for several minutes. I collected names and phone numbers as they shared known details with each other. It was pretty obvious that she was talking to Michelle. I learned a lot. It turned out that Brady died of a heart attack. I had mixed feelings about this. I always treated him well, but I didn't know at the time that he was sleeping with my wife. After their conversation, I began checking out those I could. Michelle has become a sought-after music video director. Andy and Cindy divorced. He became a detective in New York. She moved to California and remarried. I wondered if she would get these links too. One of the teachers, a woman named Robin, went to prison. Apparently, she poisoned 2 husbands and collected the insurance money. Hell, I even went to the first one's funeral right before we left. She was due on parole in 10 years. Janet died at a rave party. The pill she was given was actually a form of a very powerful illegal substance. The dealer who gave her the pill was in prison for at least another 6 years. Ben had returned to medical school and was now working as a gynecologist in Los Angeles. His wife, a very plump woman, never appeared in the video. They were still married. Ben always came with Tiffany on his arm. After that, Casey constantly checked the shared mailbox. She seemed fragile and winced every time I did something on the computer. I didn't worry about missing anything because I had set up forwarding of all emails from this mailbox to my own. I also placed mini cameras throughout the house. 2 days later, Michelle texted Casey. Michelle, Cindy just called me. She's hysterical. She was also sent a link. Casey, at least it's not just me. Did they say something? Michelle, no, link only. Casey, why not you? Michelle, I don't know. I'm not dating anyone, so maybe there's nothing to demand. There is nothing to blackmail with. Casey, I can't pay anything. Carl will understand immediately. We only have joint accounts. Michelle, I don't want to make it worse, but what if it's not about money? Casey, what do you mean? Michelle, I don't know. I'm just thinking. Casey, about what? Michelle, what if they want revenge or something? Casey, who? Michelle, Janet's husband, Ben's wife, your husband. Don't know. Anyone. Over the next few weeks, Casey watched me like a hawk, and I tried not to make her suspicious. I wanted to find out who was doing it and what they wanted before adding more drama. I was just checking the logs and maintaining a semblance of normalcy. The stress brought her to physical illness. She had an almost constant headache, she often felt sick, and she lost several kilograms. I took the necessary care. At first it was all part of the game, but then I really started to worry when I noticed that her jeans weren't holding up anymore without the belt. It was strange to be so angry with her and yet worried about her health at the same time. Her illness, in a sense, made my life easier. She would probably be surprised why we didn't have sex if she weren't so sick. Michelle contacted Casey from time to time. 2 more women were sent links. Tiffany and Tanya Logan, our son's former orchestra teacher. At first, I didn't recognize her in the video because she wasn't called by her last name. She was only in 6 videos, and Michelle mostly showed off her undeniably nice ass rather than her rather average face. Besides, I didn't know her well. The fact that the targets were mostly women made me think it was probably one of the men, perhaps trying to build a network for money and sex. But on the other hand, men might just not call Michelle, so who knows? A quiet week passed when I saw an audio file from a line recorder that I connected to the main telephone number. Casey picked up the phone. Hello? This is Sherry. Casey sighed. What do you need? Sherry had a soft, gentle voice. Michelle got in touch, told me about your problems. I thought maybe I'd take a look, since you and I, well, you know. Is it true? I did some digging. I followed the link. All the videos were uploaded from Chicago in the last 4 months. Internet cafe. Did your husband go to Chicago? No, he was here the whole time. Are you sure? I'm almost certain. Maybe they are using the computer like a zombie, but I doubt it. I would have noticed traces. Their cleaning cycle was too short to leave anything on the security footage, but I fixed it. Now we have to wait for them to return. Casey sank heavily into a chair in the kitchen. Thank you. She paused. I'm scared. I think it might be Chris, the guy I joined the group with. I remember him. He seemed like a nasty guy to me. Casey put her head in her hand, trying to pull herself together. He was like that, even more than you can imagine. I remember him saying that Ben liked being on the bottom. Something like, no normal man does this, and all that. Do you remember how furious he was when you suggested doing this to him? Casey laughed quietly, although it was clear that she was not laughing. I thought he was going to have a heart attack. Yeah, he immediately started acting macho. Sherry laughed, but then her tone changed. Are you okay, honey? Casey sobbed, holding back tears. Not really. If you need anything, call me. Anytime. I still miss you, you know. It wouldn't work. You understand. Understand. It was too big a risk. But sometimes I think we could try. Casey was already crying. I have to go. Call me anytime. I love you, honey. Crap. This could be used to sell tickets and make money. However, Casey seemed to become less wary of me, although she still felt ill most of the time. I even felt sorry for her. My initial anger faded with time and the situation. I started transferring audio files and text logs to my phone to work downstairs. Then all I could do was watch the videos from the cameras I installed around the house. There was generally little activity. Casey worked several days in schools, did household chores, and watched TV. Sometimes Michelle or Sherry would text her to see how she was doing. It soon became apparent that Casey was emotionally involved with Sherry, but they broke up when I returned. Sherry tried to get Casey to set up a meeting and possibly start a three-way relationship, but Casey was afraid of the consequences if it didn't work. Feelings on both sides were apparently still strong. Sherry, as I understood it, had neither a husband nor a boyfriend, which perhaps explained why no one touched her. After about a week, everything began to clear up. Sherry called. "I know who it is. I'm sending you a video from the cafe. It's exactly that fat bastard Chris, just like you thought." Casey's voice was almost lifeless. "He said it was over, that we'll never talk again. You know, I never loved him. The only reason I put up with him was because he brought you into our group. Slippery guy." Casey stared at the phone for a second. "Crap, that's really him in the video. He has gained a lot of weight." I hacked into the webcam of the girl who was sitting with her back to him and inserted her recording into the video feed from the security camera so you could see what he was doing. I had to be careful. Sherry clearly knew her stuff. Later that night, I heard Casey crying. The next day, I removed the ammunition from the weapon and locked it in the toolbox. I also removed the strong painkillers from my cupboards. Despite the anger and resentment, I did not want her suicide to be on my conscience. Moreover, I would not like to explain this to children. I almost decided to talk to her in the evening, but at the end of the day, another audio file arrived. I was free and listened to him immediately after the call. Casey picked up the phone, muttering something like, "Hello." "Hi, Casey, this is Chris. We need to talk." I heard her shock and doom. "Why are you doing this? We had an agreement. Just cooperate and everything will be fine." Casey's voice was wooden, almost dead. "What do you want?" "Meet me next Saturday at the Riviera Hotel in Jamesville. I'll send you the room number." "I can't. I don't have money that I could get without Carl finding out." "You will find something, or Carl will find out everything. We'll discuss the amount on Saturday. And don't even think about wearing panties." Casey almost growled. "You bastard. You said it was over." Chris chuckled. "I kept my word and destroyed that evidence. But now there's a new deal. You will play by my rules and everything will be fine. This time I won't risk jail as an accomplice." "You're a scumbag. I'll explain it to him. He'll understand." "Well, of course. Only one day he will see this video, and it will all be over. Nobody will help you. Just do what I say. We will have sex whenever I want. You will get me money or jewelry, and everything will be fine with us." How? How long?" "As much as I want." Chris hung up. I was almost ready to break up with Casey, but it seems she was blackmailed into getting into this situation in the first place. Now he just gave her an extension. I immediately called home, making up the excuse that I needed to discuss dinner. Told Casey I wanted to go out for a steak dinner. This idea seemed to bring her to her senses. I just didn't want her to do anything rash. She looked pale and sick, but she held on. I was able to get her to fall asleep with her head on my shoulder. The next day she looked a little better, so I went to work. Sherry dialed her number there. She replied, "Hello." "Cherie, this is Carl, Casey's husband. We need to talk." "About what?" "Listen, I know about your sex club and the blackmail that's going on now. I know about Chris. We can talk about the long-term consequences later. I don't know how this will all turn out, but she is the mother of my children. I can't let all this crap come down on them, so it's my responsibility to protect her from the consequences of her own actions. I'm sure you have feelings for Casey, so here's your chance to help. You're a programmer. Maybe you have the technical skills to help me figure this out." She sounded cautious, which wasn't surprising. "Depends on what you need." "She's in trouble. Chris uses her for sex and money. He demanded a meeting next Saturday." Sherry sighed. "Chris seems to have some leverage over her. She's not someone who would go into something like that willingly. She fell silent. The club's members were usually married couples, but single women like me were welcome to join. But men could only join in pairs with a woman. Otherwise, the club would turn into a bunch of men. She told everyone you had an open marriage while you were away. Judging by the video, she became one of those. But I think you're right. She said something about a deal. Looks like she was being blackmailed. If she slipped up and was blackmailed then it's okay. She should have trusted me and told me what was going on. We could have come up with something, but instead this is, oh my God. You're not very forgiving. The tone of her voice was more sad than judgmental. Try to look at your watch and imagine spending hours watching videos of your supposedly faithful wife having sex with half the town without you even realizing it. You'll find out what it's like. Sherry said nothing, obviously realizing that I knew about her participation in this half of the city. I continued, she doesn't know that I know all this, and if I say it, it will just finish her off. I don't like the way she sounds like she's ready to give up. Call her. Find out something about Chris, talk to her about it. Try to keep her from doing stupid things, more precisely, from new nonsense. I could almost hear Sherry exhale in relief. I'll talk to her. I just have one question. Why the hell did you all even allow videos of your parties to be taken? This seems incredibly stupid. 15 years ago, the internet was completely different. No one expected it to develop the way it has now. At the time, everyone thought it was a good idea to have records as insurance to confirm that everything was consensual and that everyone involved was an adult. It started after a scandal in a local club. These records should have been destroyed years ago. Obviously, that didn't happen. I trusted the person who was supposed to do it. Everyone trusted me. Michelle? She fell silent for a few seconds, so I continued. I've watched about 30 hours of footage, so I know quite a bit. Are you done with her? Likely. Almost certainly. But I'll deal with it after we clear up this mess with this bastard. Are you saying you love her? I love. Then we'll deal with it. She sighed. I'm flying out. Tomorrow. Meet me at the Sunrise Inn in Iverson. What time do you finish work? At 4:30. Then we'll meet at 5. And don't be stupid. You too. Cherry called Casey, carefully preparing the conversation. She said she had information about him and might be able to use it as leverage. Cherry advised her to stay home and let her try to change Chris's mind. When I got home, Casey seemed much calmer and our evening was fairly quiet. At dinner, she even smiled a little, albeit a little tiredly. The next day, right after work, I went to the room Cherry had sent me in a message. A slender, attractive, dark-skinned woman opened the door, stepped back, and examined me carefully. Events. I walked in slowly, raising my hands so she could see I was unarmed. She was armed. A small pistol was pointed at me in her right hand. I carefully lifted my shirt and turned around, showing that I had no weapon. I sat down on the chair by the bed. A modern laptop was installed on the table, on which several windows with code were running simultaneously. I leaned back. So. In short, I don't know what's next between me and Casey, most likely nothing, but we'll figure it out later. And with Chris, this needs to stop forever. Even if he can't use these videos to blackmail her through me, he can distribute them to her friends, family, and children. There are other people involved in this. Some of them probably don't deserve consequences. She looked at me thoughtfully. If you kick her out, I'll take her with me. I shrugged. We'll figure it out. I'm not sure how I feel about her. I keep telling myself that it doesn't matter how it all started, but I think it might be important. I really don't want her to commit suicide. This will hit the children hard. I don't want her to make more mistakes with Chris, especially ones that will bring him money. Do you have a plan? Something like that, but we need to trust each other, otherwise it won't work. She looked at me for a few seconds, then put the pistol on safety and put it on the table. I relaxed a little. What I came up with included several felonies that almost amounted to murder, and that's only if he survives, which is not guaranteed. I'm with you. She's my girl. She didn't even think, didn't blink. Amazing loyalty. Maybe we should give him what he wants. I thought this was exactly what you were trying to avoid. You know he wants sex and money. Have you heard the phrase, be careful what you wish for? She raised an eyebrow, and I noticed a hint of a smile. I explained the plan and Cherry's role in it. She smiled. Cruel, you have a bad sense of humor. I like it. I can do the computer part, and I want to participate in the rest too. And I start first. I worked in England for 4 years and can speak a good working-class London accent. I nodded. Fine. We will need help, but only from those who are fully involved. I'll let you know if Casey decides to join. I don't want her to get stuck in this if something goes wrong. I don't need my kids involved in this crap. Together, we developed and significantly expanded the plan. We talked for over an hour, and I realized that if I couldn't reconcile with Casey, she would probably be fine with Cherry. Despite everything, Cherry and I seemed to work well together, and it was impossible not to feel at least a little sympathy for her. I wasn't happy that she wanted to involve so many people, but her argument that extra participants would prevent unexpected problems made sense. Plus, by inviting them, they would learn for themselves the consequences of any brilliant idea they might have for a video. We mapped out what we would need to do and set a timeline for how long we would have to do it. Before I left, she stopped me. Casey said you and her had a sort of open marriage. I didn't know about it until the very end. Until then, I thought she trusted me. Me too. One of the reasons she hasn't walked out the door yet is because this is all so unlike her. It just doesn't make any damn sense. Cherie looked down. However, I am very sorry. I just didn't know. It's Casey's business. I don't know what the hell she was thinking. Some temporary madness, but that's no excuse. Cherie kept calling Casey and urging her to relax, telling Casey that she would go to the meeting and find out what he really wanted. She also tracked Chris's movements, so when he arrived late Friday night, we were ready for him. She traced his call about the pizza, so I caught the pizza guy in the parking lot and paid cash for it. I put on my baseball cap and walked to his door, carefully checking for witnesses. He was probably 100 pounds heavier than he had been 15 years earlier, bloated and gangly in appearance. No wonder he thought blackmailing someone for sex might be a good idea. I picked up the bag of pizza. It will be 19.95. Of course, here is a smoother version of the text. He started rummaging through his wallet. As soon as he lowered his eyes, I used a flashlight with a stun gun to disable him. He fell to the ground with a deep groan, and I quickly grabbed him by the hair, dragging him inside as Sherry followed me. It turned out to be much heavier than I expected. To make sure he wouldn't get up, I repeated the action, and then we carefully immobilized him. Sherry handed me a syringe, and I injected him with a sedative. We sat down and waited for the effect to take effect. Cherie called the others and quietly let them in. Together, we hauled him to the parking lot in a laundry cart and loaded him up for the long ride. We needed a place with more privacy. When we were there, I kept an eye on this idiot while they got everything ready. When he arrived on Saturday morning, Sherry was sitting in front of him. He looked around with concern, realizing that he was now in an abandoned industrial building. Although he didn't know it, we were in the vehicle storage building of an abandoned gravel pit. Cherie leaned forward. Hey, Chris, it's been a while. You shouldn't have messed with my girlfriend. You know how I feel about her. Chris was unable to speak due to an obstruction in his mouth. It was purchased from an accessory store 100 miles away. It was also disarmed and secured using a complex system of fastenings that could be adapted to different positions. We replaced the standard cuffs with stronger ones that seemed designed for added protection. To create a comic image, he was dressed up in a suit, complemented by bright makeup and accessories. Cherie even painted his nails to complete the look. Cherie walked up behind him. I walked in front of him. Hi, Chris. I never liked you, but know that at least I know why. He really started to struggle. I shrugged. It's all water under the bridge, or it would be if you were smart enough to leave it alone. I probably would never have known. To be honest, I had my suspicions that something was going on, but not enough to make me. If I had found out, I might have divorced her, but I almost certainly wouldn't have thought about you. But now you had to go and poke a hornet's nest with a stick. Now you have my complete and undivided attention. He opened his mouth, and I quickly gave him a piece of turkey, then gave him some of the mixture of tequila and other substances. After making sure that he accepted everything, I returned the gag to its place and adjusted the position of the chair so that he was in a half-bent position, as if he was standing leaning against the back. Cherie unzipped her gym bag and began to undress. I watched her carefully. Chris couldn't see what was going on behind him, and I knew he was trying his best to remain calm, even though it was futile. If he had seen what I saw along the wall behind him, he would have been even more frightened. Sherry undressed completely, then caught my eye, smiled mischievously, winked, and slowly spun around in place. Over the years, she had gained a little weight, but it had only benefited her. Her breasts had increased from size A to B, and where there had been no curves, there were now slight outlines. She even had a butt, whereas before her figure resembled a board. She then began to slowly dress in a revealing black Catwoman-style costume, complete with a mask and thigh-high boots, but with an open bodice and a completely revealing bottom. On his right buttock was a large temporary tattoo of handcuffs and a skull. Handing me an expensive video camera through him, she gave him the opportunity to notice her hand in a black glove, which made him struggle for a minute. I checked the camera and stood slightly away from him, a little in front. Sherry took out her riding crop and looked at me, and then at Michelle, who had a similar camera. I nodded. As soon as you're ready. I started recording. She began to pace around him, swaying her hips exaggeratedly. "Ooh, look who our little bitch is today," she said with an almost perfect accent, at least in my opinion. "You paid a lot of money for this, so let's start properly." She walked up to him and took a step forward, showing her dominance. He began to try to free himself, but her determination and the whip quickly stopped his attempts. "You can't leave, stay, and endure like a little obedient slave," she said with cold determination. When she finished her demonstration, she turned around, waved her long leg, and watched his reaction. She continued to strike lightly with the whip, showing her superiority, but was careful not to cause unnecessary harm. Her tone of voice and actions conveyed her confidence and power. She motioned for me to stop recording and stood next to me, breathing heavily. "Are you okay?" She turned away and stood silently for a few seconds, then tore off her mask and looked at me with tears in her eyes. I hate that he did this to Casey." I caught her hand before she swung the whip again and then put my arm around her shoulders. "Calm down, stick to the plan. This will make his life much more miserable in the long run." She leaned against me exhaustedly for a minute, then put the mask back on. "I can handle it." She signaled to start recording, walked over to a black bag, and pulled out a device with which she clearly intended to continue the process. She returned to him, playing with it on her finger. "Look what I have for you, sweetie. This is your favorite stallion," she smiled. He winced slightly, realizing what awaited him. She slowly touched the device to his face, and he immediately smelled the powerful scent of the oil. She carefully attached the device to herself and, after taking a few steps, found herself behind him. Then she took out a large bottle of oil and generously lubricated the device, preparing for the process. His eyes widened when he felt the touch on him. It wasn't just oil, it was sharp and stinging, and he immediately knew it would be difficult ahead. She began to insert the device carefully, trying to avoid unnecessary roughness. He cried from the pain and burning feeling as the oil began to take effect, and his suffering became more noticeable. She continued to move faster and faster, accompanying her actions with sentences addressed to him. Her words were harsh, but she clearly enjoyed being in control of the situation. The process took about half an hour, with several pauses to add oil. At these moments, she struck his legs with the whip, increasing his discomfort. Despite the pain and everything that was happening, she captured his reaction on video, not forgetting to pay attention to his facial expression. When it was finished, she took another device out of her bag and inserted it, trying to complete the process as quickly as possible. Michelle made sure everything was shot from the right angles and captured every important detail. We turned off the cameras and put him back upright. He closed his eyes and cried quietly. I used a turkey baster to give him the Gatorade. I wouldn't be upset if he died, but if I just wanted to kill him, I would just shoot him in the head. We changed him into a Sailor Moon costume, complete with a wig with blue bows, and returned him to his original position. We laid down a green artificial turf rug, set up a blue sky backdrop, and added small flowers. Sherry quietly moved away as another figure stepped away from the wall. A very short woman, not fat but slightly stocky, walked up wearing what looked like a teddy bear costume. She wore fur boots and gloves, an open corset, a pink bow tie, and a smiling teddy bear head mask. Her pubic hair was dyed light pink to match her bow tie and adorned with a small dark pink ribbon. I wondered where people even get these ideas from, but decided I didn't want to know. Tiffany adjusted her ties, walked over to Chris, lifted the mask to show his face, then lowered it back down and signaled for us to start recording. A high-pitched, squeaky voice said, "Hello, little bastard. Welcome to the teddy bear picnic." The next half hour was one of the most surreal moments of my life. Unlike Sherry, who could barely contain her rage and aggressively humiliate him, Tiffany maintained a sickly sweet tone, sang sweet songs, told funny stories, and hummed nursery rhymes. All this time, she continued to humiliate him. She also made a very beautiful flower arrangement. Chris was holding a huge vase, although not in his hands. It looked incredibly uncomfortable. She also gave him a good spanking with her pink paw while singing Hot Cross Buns. 5 verses converted into a comic parody. Finally, she came to my cell. You know what I think? I think no picnic is complete without some food. The strange teddy bear brought a small plastic tea plate with a piece of biscuit. Oh, it looks like we forgot the topping. It's not the same treat without it. After the little show, he was so exhausted that he didn't understand what was happening, and he swallowed the cake while Tiffany Bear giggled. Well, wasn't it a fun picnic? We stood him upright again, stripped him, rinsed him, and gave him more Gatorade while we set up the tiled area to look like a dirty subway toilet, using the stalls from the 2 actual toilets that were in the room, as well as the sink already installed on the wall. A couple of printed subway signs made the look strikingly authentic. Tanya and Cindy wore black suits, which was a bit of a shame because they were both in good shape. The costumes were completed with creepy pig masks. They resembled mimes who specialized in humiliation. They silently covered it with a brown liquid, chocolate syrup, which we had specially prepared. It all looked as if they were participating in some kind of theatrical production with elements of the grotesque. They then hung clothespins around his body and touched him from time to time using various props. They took out smeared candy bars and brought them to his face. The final scene brought us back to the industrial backdrop. This time, Sherry brought with her another woman in a colorful cat costume. She had a tattoo of handcuffs and a skull. The woman spoke with a deep accent that contrasted sharply with Sherry's accent. They pulled him back and inserted a special accessory into his mouth that held his mouth open. Then they took turns approaching him, conducting a kind of performance where the main goal was to demonstrate power and control. They took turns discussing and ridiculing him, indicating that he seemed to enjoy these humiliating moments. When the video was finished, Catwoman took off her mask and looked at me with eyes full of tears. Casey clearly didn't know what to say. Sherry explained everything to her only the day before Chris arrived. She claimed that Casey needed this to make sure Chris could never control her again. I didn't know what to tell her either, and the whole process left me a little numb, so I just turned to Sherry and said we needed to clean everything up. We washed Chris off and moved him to a chair. We burned all the costumes and toys in a 55-gallon metal drum that I brought for this purpose. They chatted quietly with Casey and Sherry in the corner before leaving. Right before Tiffany, Cindy, and Tanya left, they glanced at me with concern several times. Michelle took the footage from the cameras and spent the next few hours editing and adding sound effects and music to it. She added pre-recorded subway announcements and the occasional sound of trains to the bathroom video. She especially enjoyed adding cartoon sound effects and silly music to the weird teddy bears picnic video. While she did this, Sherry worked on his laptop, putting the finishing touches on the plan. Casey and I used outdoor sprayers with water and bleach to thoroughly clean the area. She still couldn't find the words. I periodically checked to see if Chris was alive. He was alive, and although I didn't really care, I knew that adding murder to the list of crimes we had committed would probably be a bad idea. If everything goes even remotely according to plan, he won't have any evidence that anything happened at all. All of his blackmail material will be destroyed and will solve the problem forever. It was approaching dusk when he came to his senses. I gave him some Gatorade, this time in a bottle with a straw. He didn't say anything. I was sure that he was convinced that I was going to kill him. "Welcome back, Chris," I said calmly. He stared at me with wide eyes, still listless. "Where did you get these videos, Chris? Don't make me ask twice. I have a car battery and a couple of cables that I would love to try on you." He looked down at the floor. When Brady died, Michelle had to go to her hometown for a week for his funeral. I snuck into her house and copied them. I thought so. Now I will tell you what will happen to you. After we drop you off, I don't want to hear from you anymore. If you report it to the police, you will disappear forever. If you tell anyone about this, you will disappear forever. You recognize some of the people here, but there are others who helped organize this, but never showed up. If an investigation begins, it will turn out that you personally ordered and paid for all the toys that were used today. I grabbed his face. They were delivered to your apartment in Chicago. You paid for the video cameras. It will be clear on your computer that you are behind everything. Don't even think about looking for anything in your apartment. There's nothing else there. If you have backups, I advise you to destroy them. Cindy's ex-husband wrote earlier that he had already cleared out the apartment. We shut down your site and used the multi-platform Dryrot virus to track and delete copies of the videos you were distributing. He may not capture everything, but he will definitely destroy most of them. We decided that simply taking away your content from your viewers wouldn't be fair, and we didn't want to leave you without money, so I turned the laptop towards Chris. His website was replaced by a new, much more professionally designed one, with the banner, Lil Beach's World of Adventures. He stared at the screen in horror. It had bright, cartoonish signs offering video downloads, with small, low-quality video clips next to it. Lil Beach vs. Catwoman. Sorting Adventures of Lil Bitcha. Picnic with a Teddy Bear and Lil Beach. Catwoman and Angry teach Lil Beach a lesson. The worst part was the visitor counter, which was ticking like a world population counter, and the download indicator was almost at the red line. Chris turned green and immediately vomited his Gatorade. "Look on the bright side, Chris," I said. "In a way, you got what you wanted. It looks like your site brings you a decent income, and you managed to sleep with all the women you tried to blackmail. Maybe not in the way you expected, but still, sex is sex, right? I really hoped that I wouldn't overdose on it or lower my blood pressure too much because of the drug." Casey and Tiffany carefully calculated the dosages, but there was no guarantee, especially with such a mixture. When he passed out, we dressed him up in a huge red lace XXXXL bodysuit. Casey added even more dramatic dragon lady makeup, quickly shaved his head, and glued on a long black wig. I picked up a van that we had borrowed from a repair shop that was temporarily closed due to the owner's arrest. I've already put fake company logos on the van and changed the numbers. As we finished loading him into the van, Casey finally spoke. "Where are we taking this shit?" I smiled for the first time in a long time. I thought he would be able to continue his adventures. I think that waking up in the Tenderloin neighborhood of Memphis, in an alley without documents and money, dressed like this, and with a high from the drug, he can expand his horizons. She giggled, a little longer and a little louder than she should have, but it was the first sign of humor she'd shown in weeks. Sherry sat in the back seat, scribbling away on yet another laptop while I drove, and Casey looked out the window, hugging herself. The whole trip was tense. Sherry occasionally tried to start a conversation, but Casey simply sank into her own despair. When we got to Memphis with only 2 stops, one for gas and one for coffee, it took us about half an hour to find a suitable toxic waste dump site. Casey asked me how I chose it. Actually, Sherry analyzed the data: sexual favors, lack of surveillance cameras, gang activity, and high rates of sexually transmitted diseases. All roads lead here. After we found a suitable abandoned alley and pushed Chris out, Casey winced. I guess I should be grateful that it's not me in this nightwear. There was a brittle, wistful quality to her tone. She wasn't sure she wouldn't be next in line for something like this. I should have said something before she panicked at the thought of a one-way ticket to a brothel in the Congo. You are the mother of our children, and even if they are already adults, when the grandchildren are born, they will need a grandmother. I don't know where we will go next, but this was not revenge, but a solution to an ongoing problem. I really enjoyed it, though. I noticed a relief flash across her face. About 2 hours after we left Memphis, Casey spoke up. Can we talk? All three. I want to tell you what happened. All. I don't need everything. I have enough video for this, I answered, a little calmer than I expected. That's not what I'm talking about. I want to tell you how it all started. Why did it all start? Chris's comment about complicity after the fact suddenly came to mind. Maybe I really needed to know. We'll talk at home. She shrank into herself, but nodded. Once we got home and settled in, we sat in the living room, looking at each other. I nodded to Casey. This is your story. She stared at her feet and took a deep breath. Chris had evidence that I killed a man. This caught my attention, and Sherry sat up abruptly. What? I was at my sister Tiffany's bachelorette party. I drank a little, but I took care of myself and didn't get drunk. I drank one pina colada. She looked down at her feet. Judging by what I found out later, the dancers agreed with the bartender. He put something in our drinks to make us all lose our minds. They did this so often that they knew what they were doing. I think because of the lowered inhibitions and the already sexual atmosphere, the dancers usually got what they wanted. The bachelorette would never admit that things got out of control, so they were never caught. I looked at her. And how did this lead to murder? Not murder. I found out. This is classified as a felony using a motor vehicle, but the sentence is almost the same. I tried to leave early. I felt bad, dizzy. The music was too loud. I didn't know I was drugged. I thought I had the flu or something. One of the dancers followed me and tried to climb into the back of the minivan. I was too disconnected from what they had given me to realize that he was there. I backed up and ran over him. Then she moved out and ran over him again. I don't even remember how it happened or how I got home. Lord. Cherie looked just as horrible as I was. Chris worked at the club as a security guard, part-time. A few days later, he came with CCTV footage. Said he told the police that someone broke in and stole the records. If I don't cooperate, he'll pretend he found them hidden somewhere in the club. No one would believe that I wasn't driving drunk and staggering around the van like I did on the tape. He played it up. Recently, a drunk driver had already been jailed for hitting a homeless man in heavy fog, and I knew what awaited me. If I had resisted, I would have gone to prison for 20 years, and you would have gone broke trying to save me. Even if I begged you not to do this, you would still spend all our savings for me. I couldn't do this to you and the children. It was true, and I knew it. She continued. I made a deal. I became his partner in the club. This was his main hobby. I refused to participate in anything else. She said that she had to take care of the children, and even finding a nanny for evenings at the club could arouse suspicion. He agreed to this. I wasn't thrilled, but agreed. He made it clear that if he suspected that I told you, he would hand me over to the police. I didn't even realize that I had been set up until he let it slip almost a year later. By then, it was already too late. I couldn't prove anything. He said he would let me go when you returned, and he really did, until today. You didn't look too driven in many of these videos, I said, but I remembered her lost look in the first recordings. At first, I tried to, well, stay away as much as possible. Chris said that if I didn't show more enthusiasm, I would have something to think about in prison. I was just numb to everything. I used various methods to make myself feel less guilty. Each person has his own preferences and interests. For example, Michelle was into filming, Ben liked the feeling of dominance, and Tiffany was incredibly free in her desires. Casey shook her head with a small smile at the memory. She added that she felt that some things were less treacherous, so she decided to create her own image. She knew it sounded stupid, but it helped her cope with the situation. When Chris arrived, it became difficult to avoid interacting with men, especially in the beginning when she was looked at as the new girl, but she tried to create certain rules and boundaries, and this helped her feel more secure. When she met Sherry, she finally found someone with whom she could feel comfortable and safe. Sherry always maintained eye contact, which helped Casey feel connected and not feel completely alone. I nodded, realizing how difficult it was. It was clear that these memories caused her pain, her eyes filled with sadness, and her gaze became unfocused. She exhaled slowly, her voice soft and empty. When there is no choice, everything seems easier. You try to act as if everything is fine, smiling even when it's not. And then you come home, stand for a long time under a hot shower, trying to get rid of the sensations that torment you. You look at the bottles of medicine and think about how easy it would be to walk away from all this. But then you remember that you have children, and you don't want them to find you this way. This keeps you from taking desperate steps. Then you go there again, and again, and again. I even thought about it seriously when you had to come back to take care of the kids. I had a plan to make it look like an accident. But then you were offered a job here, and we had to move. It was like liberation, like salvation. Even then, I couldn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel caught up in it and not be able to live in peace. Today, I finally realized that I can leave this behind. I leaned back in my chair. Crap. Sherry gasped quietly, and I looked at her. She played almost to gray. I swear to God, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. She stood up and began to back away towards the door, staggering. I probably wouldn't even have thought to stop her if she hadn't fallen to her knees and started vomiting. I noticed this before Casey did. Sherry realized that she was essentially an unwitting accomplice in a year-long assassination attempt. Casey was so emotionally drowned out by what had happened, so built up walls in her head, that at first she didn't understand why Sherry felt so bad. Casey had years to deal with it, but Sherry didn't. Chris didn't hold the gun to Casey's head, but it was almost the same thing. I was starting to think that we were too soft on him. I should have killed that bastard. Casey grabbed some towels, and we helped Sherry clean up. She flinched every time Casey touched her, whispering, "Forgive me. Excuse me. Excuse me." We got her to the living room, and she started apologizing again before Casey interrupted her. "Sherry, you were part of what kept me going. You didn't know what was happening. Only Chris knew about this. You were the only person who looked at me as something more than just a warm body with a few convenient holes. Your love may have saved me on those nights when everything was too much, and I thought about stepping off a bridge." I looked at Casey, and she sighed. "Sorry, Carl, but I needed someone. I had feelings for her, strong ones. I loved her, and I still love it. She needed something to hold on to, like a castaway clinging to something that kept her afloat. She was lucky Sherry really cared about her enough to let her go without fighting when I returned." "I understand." Casey shook her head. "I love Sherry, I really do. I always will. But I'm yours, completely. I always will. You can kick me out after all this, but I will never leave if it depends on me. Maybe I had ruined everything, but I didn't know what else to do." I looked at her, hugging Sherry, who was almost curled up in a ball. I came over and sat down next to him. "Don't know. You couldn't talk to a lawyer about this. I think I realized that I had made a decision. I think you did everything you could. You did what you thought was best for me and the children. That's all I could ever ask for. Her eyes opened wide, and she looked at me with an almost pleading expression. Is it true? Will you really forgive me? We can handle it. I don't even know if forgive is the right word. You've been set up. You didn't really have much choice. You choose the least terrible option for all of us, even if you suffered because of it. She leaned against me. Now what? We will live day by day. But you, skinny girl, will finally start eating normal food. You're completely skin and bones. I reached out and touched Sherry's shoulder. You saved her. I will never forget this. Sherry nodded. She still looked a little pale, but was already recovering from the shock. Casey, a lot of things are becoming clear now. I'm glad we had what we had. It's just a pity that it was all overshadowed by this crap. Casey kissed her forehead softly. Me too. But you will always remain a dear person to me. I will always love you. Sherry smiled faintly. Just not in that sense, right? I kind of guessed that this would happen. It's the same choice you've made before. But I could dream, right? Her smile became a little sly as she turned her gaze to me. I owe you everything, Sherry. We will always be close. I really felt it. Without her, my home could have become my grave. Casey and I set Sherry up in the guest room and then just held each other. Over the next few days, we figured out everything we could. Casey insisted that I find out what happened to her now that her memories were back. It was not difficult to find the incident. A male dancer was hit by a car near a club. Sherry managed to get hold of his criminal record: illegal substances, repeated cases of beating women. He also had an aggravated assault charge, which was dropped after the victim was publicly exposed and left town. It was pretty obvious what he planned to do to Casey. Casey couldn't know any of this. She didn't even realize that she had hit him. The police always look for the simplest explanation. She would almost certainly have been imprisoned. Perhaps she could have avoided this if she had immediately proven that she was under the influence, but that was not a guarantee either. Sherry eventually returned home, promising to visit us from time to time. She and Casey would remain the closest of friends, but forever ex-lovers. Sherry had a hard time coming to terms with her role in Casey's hellish torment, even if it was unwitting. We hope that one day she will find the very princess she was looking for. At least she started searching again. I thought about going back and ending things with Chris. What he did was unspeakably terrible, inhuman, but I decided not to do this. Not because he had already suffered enough, or because I wanted to let go. I left him alone because it was probably the cruelest thing I could have done. His experience broke something in him. Casey and I received a call from Michelle. Chris called her and timidly asked for help. It turned out that little bitch was a hit with a certain kinky crowd that paid handsomely for videos of his absolute humiliation. We programmed it by accident. He quickly got to the point where he could only get satisfaction from watching and experiencing his own humiliations, but he needed new videos for the site and more extreme humiliations for himself. Each time they became tougher. It wasn't hard to understand what was happening. Pilots call this the death spiral. It seemed to him that he was flying level, but in fact he was circling, losing altitude, and approaching an inevitable fall. Last time I checked, he added some new videos to his site with Michelle's help. Michelle refused to film the video herself, but showed him how to set up the cameras. I guess she didn't want to be there when it was all over. He begged Michelle to arrange another video with Catwoman and the evil bitch. This is his most popular. Moreover, alarmingly, the video with a teddy bear takes second place. This knowledge made me double-check that the doors were locked at night. Casey and Sherry want nothing to do with it. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to